All right, everybody, let's go ahead and learn TouchDesigner. The first thing I think you should know in TouchDesigner is SOPs. So we're going to learn about SOPs in this video. And SOPs you can think of as shapes. They're more than shapes, but for my way of thinking about TouchDesigner, I like to think of them as just shapes or objects. And I think the technical name for SOPs is surface operators, because you can basically use them to create a surface. So without over-explaining SOPs, I'm just going to get right into how to add SOPs, and we are going to learn by doing. So let's go ahead and learn how to add SOPs, or any operator for that matter, but we're learning about SOPs right now, so we're going to add SOPs. The first way to add an SOP is press the Tab key on the keyboard. So if we just press the Tab key, it will open the Op Create dialog, or OP Create dialog. So here we have the create dialog, and if we just click on this blue category right here that says SOP, that will take us into the SOPs category. And you can see there's 40 or 50 operators in this list, but don't let that overwhelm you. We really just end up using maybe 5 or 10 of these operators, at least to get started with TouchDesigner. So to get started, let's just go ahead and click on one of the simplest operators, which is the box. So let's go ahead and click on the word box right here. And then you can drop that box anywhere in the grid area of TouchDesigner. I'm just going to drop that box right there, or click on the grid area to place that box. And now we have a box operator, or box SOP in TouchDesigner. So let's move on to the second way that you can add a SOP or any operator into TouchDesigner. So that second method is to just double click an empty area of the grid. So let's just double click on any empty space in the grid area here. And that double click opens the OP Create dialog once again, just using a different method. We are in the SOP category. This time, let's click on circle, so we can just add a circle into TouchDesigner here. So click on circle and place that circle somewhere in the grid area. And now we have a circle in TouchDesigner. Now let's go to the third method to add an SOP in TouchDesigner, which is the Add Operator button. So let's go ahead and zoom out a little bit. And then once we're zoomed out, I'm just going to click on this Add Operator button. I'm going to zoom in that area. And if you hover over that, you can see that it says Add Operator when you hover over it. So you just want to click on that plus icon that's right here, and that will open the OP Create dialog, just using a different method. So I'm going to click on that plus icon, and boom, there we have the OP Create dialog once again with all of our operators here. This time I'm going to click on the sphere operator right here. So I'm just going to click on sphere, and then I'm going to place the sphere somewhere in the grid area there. Boom, now we have a sphere in TouchDesigner. So last but not least, let's check out the fourth method to create an SOP in TouchDesigner, which is right-clicking the output dots or squares of an operator. So if you look at the right-hand side of an operator in TouchDesigner, such as this box right here, you can see these two blue squares. And if we look at these blue squares, that is the output area of this operator. And you can see that I think all operators in TouchDesigner have this output area, or at least most of them do. So anyway, the important thing is that we can hover over these two blue squares with the mouse and then right click on those two blue squares. And that is one way to add an operator. And the difference between this method of adding an operator and the others is that this method will by default connect the new operator to the operator that you right click on. So let's just go ahead and right click on this output area of this box operator, okay? And when you hover over that, those blue squares go from dark blue to light blue. So right click on those two blue squares of this box operator, and then the OP Create dialog appears like it did before. But the difference is if you select an operator here and place it, it will be connected to the operator that we right-clicked on. So to demonstrate this, let's go ahead and click on the copy operator in the SOPs category. So we're in the SOPs category. We're just going to click on this copy operator right here, and we're just going to click on copy and place that operator somewhere to the right of the box operator. And you can see that there's a blue line connecting the box to the copy operator. So we click to drop the copy operator, and you can see that that line is now connecting box to copy. So that is important in the next section that we're going to go to, which is rendering SOPs. So basically, we added a couple of operators in TouchDesigner here. No need to overthink it. Don't worry about anything at this point. We're just going over the basics, just learning how to add stuff in TouchDesigner. So we covered what are SOPs, we covered how to add SOPs. Now we're moving on to the most common types of SOPs. And basically there's a term generator, which is an operator that generates something as opposed to modifies something. So this is my favorite thing to start out with because it's something that we can see, like a box or a circle or a sphere. So those are all generator SOPs. They generate something in TouchDesigner. It generates a shape. So let's go ahead and open the OP Create dialog just by double clicking on the empty grid area of TouchDesigner here. Let's go ahead and double click. And if you look in the OP Create dialog under SOPs, you can see that some of these have a dark blue background, such as box and circle and sphere. Well, that means that those are generator SOPs if they have a dark blue background. So any of those operators should basically generate something when you place those in TouchDesigner. So those are my favorite types of SOPs, which some of them are box, circle, and sphere, and things like that. Okay, so we have some generator SOPs there. That's what you should start out with in TouchDesigner because it actually makes something that you can see. So let's go ahead and close the OP Create dialog just by pressing the X right here. All right, so we covered what are SOPs, how to add them, and the most common types of SOPs, which are generator SOPs. Now let's quickly move into how to render SOPs, which just means how to get an SOP to be displayed in TouchDesigner, or basically output in TouchDesigner. So what we're gonna do is zoom out a little bit here. And one thing I'm going to do is delete this copy operator that we placed. So I'm just going to click on this copy operator so that the border is green. Then we know it's selected. And I'm just going to press delete on the keyboard to remove that operator. So that operator is now gone. Now we can actually render one of these SOPs or all three of them, and they will actually be displayed in the background of TouchDesigner. And that is an essential thing to know. So let's go ahead and do that right now. So just to give you a preview of what we're about to do, we're going to add about 3 or 4 different operators at this point to make it so this box appears in the background of TouchDesigner to kind of make our project more tangible or make us kind of feel like we're actually making progress here. So what we're going to do is actually right click on the output area of this box. I'm going to zoom in. And if you hover over the output squares of this box operator, we need to right click on the output squares of this box operator. So hover over those squares so that those are nice and bright blue, and right click on those 2 blue squares. And then the OP Create dialog appears. And at this point, you want to make sure you're in the comp category, not the SOP category. So make sure you click on the comp category right here. And then once you're in the comp category, you need to click on this geometry operator right here. So go ahead and click on geometry and then click just to the right of the box operator to place that geometry operator in the grid. And that makes sure that our box is connected to the new geometry operator that we placed. We need that to happen in order to render this box so that it appears in the background of TouchDesigner. So at this point, I'm going to move this text area so that we have some room to place some new operators. So at this point, we have our box operator, we have our geometry operator, and now we're going to add 3 more operators so that our box is displayed or rendered in the background of TouchDesigner. So I'm going to double click the empty grid area here to open the OP Create dialog. And then once again, in the comp category, we're going to click on camera. So there's camera right there. I'm just going to click on camera and then click above our geo operator, above our geometry to place the camera. So now we have a camera and it's placed right about there. Now let's go ahead and double click on the empty grid area one more time to place a new operator. So we double click on the empty grid area. We have our OP Create dialog once again, and still in the comp category. This time we're going to click on the light operator. So go ahead and click on light and then just place that light somewhere to the right of cam. So we have a camera and a light now. So moving on to the last operator that we're about to place for this render setup, we're going to double click on the empty grid area to once again open the op create dialog. And this time we're going to click on the top category, this kind of dark purple category here. And in the top category, you're going to look for render. So there is render right there. And by the way, you can go ahead and click on the search bar and type in the word render to filter out the other operators so that only the one you want is basically visible. So we're in the top category and we're going to click on render. There is render right there. We're just going to click on that. And then we're going to place the render operator somewhere to the right of geo, somewhere below light. That's just where it feels most comfortable for me. So I'm just going to click on the empty grid area to place that render operator. And immediately when we place this render operator, you can see that a couple of lines were connected from our previous operators into the new operator. And those lines basically bring the operators that we already placed all together and feed into the render operator in order to render our box. So just to recap, we have a box operator that is creating a box, and then we have a geometry operator that is taking our box and making it into a usable shape or a renderable shape. Then we have a camera that is actually observing our geometry. And then we have a light that is shining light onto our geometry and making it so that it can all be rendered. So once again, we have a box shape. We have a geometry to kind of prepare that box. We have a camera observing our geometry, and we have a light shining light onto our geometry. And those lines can kind of be represented with these little arrows here that all feed into the render operator. So this box is actually now being rendered in TouchDesigner, which is great, but we can't see that in the background of TouchDesigner. So all we need to do to get this to appear in the background of TouchDesigner is click on this display button, this little blue circle in the bottom right corner of the render operator. That is the display button right there. So we're going to click on that blue dot. And once we click on that blue dot, now our shape is appearing in the background of TouchDesigner. Woohoo! So here we have our shape. It's being rendered, but at this point, we're just looking at this box straight on, so we can't really see that it's 3D. So what we're going to do is we're just going to click on this cam operator here, and we're actually going to click on the button in the bottom right corner of this cam operator, and that button is right here. That is the viewer active button. So go ahead and hover over that button, and then it'll say a little tooltip pops up that says viewer active. So there is the viewer active button. You want to just click on that viewer active button. You can see that the operator for the camera kind of appears a little bit differently now. So at this point, you can see the icon changes, or the cursor changes after we click that viewer active button. And what you want to do is just click and hold and drag that camera operator until there's a different view. And now you can see that adjusted the camera. So that just changed the camera angle. You can click and drag and drop one more time to change the camera angle again. And you can see that that changes the camera angle of what's being viewed or rendered in TouchDesigner in the background of TouchDesigner there. So that just changes the camera angle when we're rendering something. That's very helpful. So anyway, that's how you render a shape in TouchDesigner. Just a quick recap. We have our box, we have a geometry that's preparing our box, we have a camera that is observing the box, and we have a light that's shining light onto the box. All these operators are coming together to feed into the render operator that's displaying everything in the background of TouchDesigner. So I know I went over that several times, but that's because this is a very important setup. This cam geo light render setup is something that you're going to be doing for probably almost every project that you do in TouchDesigner. So that is an essential kind of setup. All right, so we rendered this box, but let's say we want to render this circle or this sphere instead. All we need to do is click on the output of the circle or the sphere, and then click and drag on that output, and then drag until we are touching the line that connects box to geo, or any operators for that matter, until that line is yellow, and we can drop or release the mouse, and that will replace that connection. So now the circle is being rendered instead of the box, and we can do that with the sphere as well. So we can just click on the output of the sphere, drag that, and replace the line connecting circle to geo, and now the sphere is being rendered in TouchDesigner. All right, so now that we rendered some stuff in TouchDesigner, let's move on to the next section of this tutorial. I'm just going to zoom out and then I'm going to scroll up a little bit here so that we can see our text note area. So at this point, we covered what are SOPs, how to add them, the most common types of SOPs, and how to render SOPs using geometry, camera, and light. Now let's move on to how to change parameters in our SOPs. I'm just going to zoom out a little bit here. All right, so now we have a shape that's being rendered in TouchDesigner. Now let's change some parameters on the shape to make this a different size, or just change whatever parameters are available for this operator. Okay, so all we need to do is click on the operator whose parameters we need to change, such as this sphere right here. So that is selected, and you can see that by the green border around the operator. Now we know it's selected. And now with the sphere operator selected, we look in the top right-hand corner of TouchDesigner, you can see the parameters area of TouchDesigner. So let's zoom in on that and check that out. So we're just taking a look at the parameters area here. You can see the name of the operator with which we are looking at, which is sphere. And then you can see some tabs of different parameters that we can modify for this operator. And in the first tab, or the default tab, you can see we have all these different parameters here. But for right now, let's keep this simple and just focus on the radius parameter, because that's going to change the size of this operator. So what we're going to do is simply just change one of these parameters. So let's just change the X value of the radius parameter for the sphere operator. So what we're going to do is just select that number 1 and change that to something else. So I'm just going to select the number 1 and let's do 2 instead of 1. And you can see that changed the size of the sphere in the X direction. So let's go ahead and remodify that parameter. Let's change that from 2 to 0.5. And now you can see the sphere is tall instead of wide. And another really cool thing you can do in TouchDesigner is, instead of using the keyboard to input a new value, you can click and hold on a parameter and then move the mouse or the trackpad up or down to increment. So what we're going to do now is use a different method to modify a parameter that's super useful. So let's just focus on the rotate parameter right now, and let's focus on the Y value of the rotate parameter. So what we're going to do is click and hold on the Y value of the rotate parameter, and then you'll see this little kind of list of numbers pop up. And these are the increments that you can use to just kind of change this parameter. So with the mouse held down, hold down that mouse button, keep that held down. And now let's move the mouse up to where the number 1 is selected. And now let's move the mouse to the left. And you can see that this parameter is changed or incremented for the number that we selected, which is the number 1. So as you move the mouse to the left, that parameter is going to change with the increment we selected, which is 1. So you can go ahead and click and hold that and go up to 10 and move the mouse to the right a little bit. And you can see that that changes the parameter in a much more significant way. And so we're just rotating this sphere as we move the mouse to the left or to the right. And that's a very useful way to change a parameter in TouchDesigner. And just to show you that one more time, let's go to the radius parameter once again. And let's change the Z value this time of the radius parameter. So I'm just going to click and hold on that Z value. And now let's go ahead and select 0.1 as the increment. And we're going to move the mouse to the left, and you can see that that changes the Z value, or the thickness of the sphere. Okay, so just a quick recap on the 2 ways that we have used to modify parameters in TouchDesigner. The first method we used was just to select the value and then use the keyboard to type in a new value. And the second method that we used, like on rotate, was to click and hold on the parameter and then select an increment and move the mouse to the left or right to move that up or down. So now let's check out a third method to change a parameter in TouchDesigner. This third method is a little bit more advanced than the other 2 methods, but I think it's very good to know about this method. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. What I'm going to do is zoom out. And now let's double click in an empty area of the grid in TouchDesigner to open the OP Create dialog. And now what we're going to do is click on the chop category right here. That's the green category. Let's click on chop. And now we're going to click on the operator that is named LFO, which stands for low frequency oscillator. That is just something that creates a number and then moves the number up and down for us automatically to give us kind of some movement for something in TouchDesigner. So let's go ahead and click on LFO, and then we're just going to place LFO somewhere near sphere. So just click somewhere and that will drop that LFO operator in the canvas area. And now you can see what's happening with this LFO. It's creating a number and then it's oscillating that number up and down. So what we're going to do now is just use this LFO. We're going to use the number that's being generated by this LFO to be used as the parameter for our sphere. So what we're going to do is essentially just drop this LFO operator onto our sphere parameter to get one of the parameters of the sphere to be represented by this LFO. So I'm going to zoom out. So with this LFO operator selected with that green border around it, what we're going to do is click on the Viewer Active button in the bottom right corner of this LFO operator. And if you hover over that button, it gives you that tooltip that says Viewer Active. That's how we know we're on the right button. We're going to click on that Viewer Active button, and then that changes the look of this operator. Now we're ready to basically drag this operator onto the parameter of some other operator, such as sphere. So with the Viewer Active, now we're ready. We're just going to zoom out. And at this point, we're going to click on the sphere operator to select that operator. So just click on sphere. And once you click on sphere, you can see the parameters of the sphere. All we need to do now is click and hold and drag on that LFO operator and drag that onto a parameter of our sphere and then drop it and click Export Chop. So let's do that now. What we're going to do now is just click and hold on that LFO operator. So we just click and hold and then drag, and then we drop this onto any parameter, any numerical parameter of our sphere operator, such as the X value of the radius parameter. So just drop that onto the X value of the radius parameter in our sphere. And then you see this little menu pop up. And at this point, we just want to click on Export Chop. So we just click on Export Chop right now. And then you can see the effect of that. So that changes that X value of the sphere pretty radically, pretty quickly. And that's too fast for my comfort. So what we're going to do is click on the Viewer Active button once again for the LFO operator. And now that the Viewer Active button is turned off, I'm going to click on the LFO operator to select that operator. And now we should be able to see the parameters of the LFO operator up here in the top right corner. So now I'm going to zoom in and focus on those parameters of the LFO operator. And what we're going to do is just adjust the frequency parameter of this LFO operator. So I'm just going to click and grab that little slider right there, and then move that slider down to where that frequency is much slower. Now you can see that the size of that sphere is oscillating at a much more pleasant kind of frequency. So that is basically a cool trick in TouchDesigner as far as changing parameters of an operator using a chop, which like the LFO operator is just a cool way to add some dynamic kind of characteristic to your TouchDesigner project. Okay, so we are moving toward the kind of end part of this tutorial, the last couple of sections. So I'm going to do a quick recap here. We have a couple of SOPs that are creating a shape. We have our camera that is observing the shape. We have the light that's shining light onto the shape. We have our geometry that's preparing the shape. And we have our render operator, which is pulling all of this stuff together to render stuff and put it in the background of TouchDesigner here. And in addition to that, we dropped a chop into TouchDesigner to dynamically modify the parameter of the SOP sphere. So with all of that said, what we're going to do now is add another SOP to modify the look and feel of that sphere. That's going to add a lot of character to our project. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is move this sphere operator to the left a little bit so that we can put an operator after the sphere. So we just have a little bit more room after the sphere operator. So I'm just going to click on the sphere operator, drag that to the left, and drop that there. And now let's go ahead and double click on the empty canvas area to open the OP Create dialog. And now with the OP Create dialog open, we're going to click on the SOP category. So go ahead and click on SOP so that that's selected. And from the SOP category, I'm going to click on Fractal. That's one of my favorite TouchDesigner operators, by the way. It creates a really cool effect on your shape. So let's just go ahead and click on Fractal. And then you can click in the empty canvas area here somewhere near sphere and just drop that by the sphere. And for some reason, when I dropped that fractal operator, it automatically connected a line to the sphere operator. Well, I don't like that. That's not really correct for this little tutorial here. So what I'm going to do is right click on that line that I don't want to appear anymore. So when I hover over that line that I don't want, it turns yellow, and then I can right click on that. Or if you're using a touchpad, you can press both fingers on the touchpad to do a right click. So I'm just going to right click on that. Then I'm just going to click disconnect. So now that is disconnected. Now that's what we want. So now at this point, what we're going to do is basically make it so the fractal is between sphere and geo. So what I'm going to do is click on the output area of fractal, click and drag, and then drop that onto the line connecting sphere to geo to kind of steal that line away from the sphere. So I'm just going to click on the output area of fractal, drag, and then release that when we are connecting to the line from sphere to geo. So that kind of stole that connection away from sphere. So now fractal is connected to geo, and now we're going to connect sphere to fractal so that these three operators are working together basically in one line. So what I'm going to do is click on the output area of sphere and then connect that to the input area of fractal. So just hover over that output area of sphere, click, and then drag and connect that to the input area of fractal and drop or release the mouse onto that input area of fractal. And now you can see that those three operators are working together. And just to make things a little bit cleaner, I'm going to click and drag that fractal operator and move it into the straight line with sphere. Now you can see what that fractal operator is doing to our sphere. And as you can see, that adds quite a bit more detail and makes our shape much more interesting. Okay, so the last part of this tutorial, I'm just going to quickly show you how to add a top. So basically, I'm just going to do this instead of over-explaining it. Let's go ahead and double-click on the empty canvas area to open the OP Create dialog. There we are. And with the top category selected, we're just going to click on Transform. So go ahead and click on the word Transform, and then drop Transform somewhere to the right of Render. Now let's just click and drag from the output area of Render onto the input area of Transform. So we're just going to hover over the render operator over the output area so that those purple squares are light purple instead of dark purple, and click and drag and then drop that onto the input area of Transform. And now you can see that Render is feeding to Transform. So we're going to make sure that the Transform operator is selected, and you know because of the green border around Transform. I'm going to zoom out, and now we're going to focus on the parameters of the Transform operator in the top right corner here. And what we're going to do is turn on this switch that says Comp over Background Color. So just switch that from off to on by clicking on that. And then we're going to change the fourth value of the background color parameter. So that is the Z parameter here. That is the fourth box of the background color parameter. Let's go ahead and click on that value and change that from 0 to 1. And then now if we look down a little bit, you can see that that made a black background for what is being shown in our project. So now our rendered image has a black background. But this transform operator is not what we're seeing in the background of TouchDesigner, because the display button for render is on and not for transform. So we're just going to switch that around by clicking on the display button for render to turn off the display of render. And now we're going to turn on the display button for transform so that that operator is being shown in the background of TouchDesigner. So just click that display button for transform, and now you can see that is what we're seeing in the background. So just to do a quick recap of what we've done in this project, we added a couple of generator SOPs such as box, circle, and sphere, and then we added what I call an effect SOP to kind of add an effect to a generator SOP, and that effect SOP is our fractal. We added a chop to dynamically modify the parameter of our sphere. We added a camera to kind of observe our geometry. We added a light to shine light onto the geometry. We added a render operator to bring the camera, the light, and the geometry all together. And then finally, we added a transform operator in order to change the look of the operator before the transform operator. And we made sure that that display button for transform is turned on so that that is the operator that we are seeing in the background. So yeah, that's pretty much it for SOPs. And then we also did a little bit of extra stuff with chop and with pop. But I hope that wasn't too confusing. If you have any issues or if that was confusing for you, just let me know in the comments below so that I can do better in the next video. I hope you did get something out of this video. And if you did, you can leave me a comment. You can press the like button. You can subscribe to my channel so that you can see future tutorials. But anyway, the most important thing is try to have fun, keep it simple, try not to overwhelm yourself, and just start out simple, start out with basics. I like to start out with spheres and circles and simple shapes and stuff like that, and try to keep things as simple as possible until you really master TouchDesigner, and then you can add more complicated stuff. So anyway, like I said, have fun and enjoy.